TitleMatchNetwork.com.
But Vince McMahon called me up before WrestleMania 3, or just that, no, before WrestleMania 4.
Right.
Atlantic City or whatever. And I could sense something was up because we didn't have to make the TVs before the WrestleMania. And he called me up on the phone to tell me that, and this is an exact quote, he said, "We have more fan letters for you than any other wrestler in the territory. Like any other. There's nobody that has more fan. They can't figure it out." Remember Vince laughing, going, "I can't figure it out." There's more fan letters. Now, I always think there's no way I had to have more fan letters than Hogan. But I will go by what Vince says. Vince did say that I had more fan letters than any single wrestler in the entire company as a heel. And that he was going to give me this big push and turn me babyface, break me up from the team. They weren't sure what they'd do with Jim. Of course, I wasn't really looking forward to be a heel or a babyface, but I was so happy being a heel. But I also saw this was like the big opportunity.
Right.
The dolls, the merchandise, all that kind of stuff. So, of course, I bit into it hook, line, and sinker, and immediately did jobs for Bad News Brown after that for the next, that was my big push. And I was still over, because they were getting Bad News ready for Hogan. And we had decent enough matches. I don't think I lost too much my credibility or anything by doing that for news. And it wasn't so much putting anybody over. It was just like they'd been promised me like this kind of break was like it would have been a big thing for me. And then they threw us in with I think Hockey and Valentine or something like that. We just sort of moved around. Went from tag to single to tag.
You worked a couple of programs with the Rockers too, I think.
Yeah, that came much later on.
Later.
Yeah. We mostly kind of just went. We even worked with Demolition. We had some good matches with Demolition.
Right.
As baby faces. Probably the best ones as baby faces in those days. And I guess, you know what it was? I remember telling Jim that it's a bit like a cycle. I said, we got to go all the way around again.
Right.
And we just got to outwork everybody again. I said, every night we're still getting a decent pop and getting good reactions and stuff. And I think the business was healthier in a lot of ways in those days. We just sort of survived that a lot of guys can let that break you.
Right.
We survived and came all the way around again, and just in time to sort of outwork everybody again. I mean, I don't think we ever had them handed to us for any kind of political reason. We got them strictly because we worked hard. We outworked everybody. Jim was a character. When the time came, those tag team matches, we had all the pay-per-views anyway. We had awesome tag team matches. And, the psychology, we had really good tag team psychology. And I take all the credit for all of that. But the Demolition were great. They were good workers. Bill Eadie was an awesome worker. And they really, once they worked with us, same with the Bulldogs and the Demolition. There became such a respect and an admiration for each other. That you really it was a lot of fun working with them every night. If we could have wrestled each other for 3 years, it would have been better. And the same thing, they willingly dropped the belts to us. They saw it as we'd earned it.
Right.
It was time for them to pass them off to somebody, and we were the right guys. And as soon as we got the belts, I don't think we had the belts a month. When they pulled, I remember me and Jim just did our first pictorial for the magazine with the Hart Foundation tank top, the limited edition.
Right.
That might still be out there. It was one of my favorite WWF t-shirts anyway. We were all excited about the t-shirt shoot. And then they told us Vince wanted to have a meeting with us. And I remember he came in and he said, "I'll talk to you one at a time, and I'll take Jim first." And I didn't know what to expect. I had no idea. I didn't know what was going on. We just got the belts, and we were working pretty hard. And I kept trying to think of what could we have done wrong.
Right.
And I remember Jim came out. He looked very. You could tell it was like a mix. He didn't. I knew something was up. He came out with kind of like. His eyes kind of told me that something's up, but I can't tell if it's good news or bad news yet. And then when I walked in, and he goes, "We're going to take the belts off you. he goes, you know how we've been promising you the real push, the big push. He pulled that rug out on me. I don't know how many times. He goes, this is the real one. You're going to work with all the top guys. You're going to be in all the main event matches. You're going to make all the big money.
What year is this around?
88 maybe,
Okay.
89. We won the belt SummerSlam 89, I think, or 90, I think.
Right.
And this would be about a month later. So anyway, he goes, we're breaking you up, taking the belts off. You have them drop them to the Rockers, and we're going to give you this big push in singles. And so I asked about Jim again, and he said that they weren't sure what they're going to do with Jim, but they might use him as an announcer or something like that. So I remember I came out, it was kind of those bittersweet things because Jim had been a really good partner to me. But at the same time, this was a real big break.
Right.
And I don't have any control over where they pull us. And you can't resist their ideas. Like if I said, look, I want to stay with Jim, all I'd be doing is burying myself,
right.
You know, blowing a big opportunity because then they would
find things.
Yeah, they just ruin you for disagreeing with them. And it was a good break for me. So, and Jim wasn't necessarily out of it either. It was let's see what happens. So we did that farce match up in Indiana somewhere, Fort Wayne, Indiana,
right.
with the Rockers. And it was kind of a pathetic situation. The top rope broke.
Right.
I sometimes think Jim did it on purpose with a front turnbuckle. Jim wasn't happy with the direction.
Right.
Yeah, this didn't offer a whole lot for him. And he took a front turnbuckle and broke the turnbuckle corner. And we had this awful referee. Other than that night when he failed miserably and let everybody down, Freddie somebody from Boston.
I don't know.
Freddie, anyway, I can't remember his name, but I remember he almost like was like a little girl or something in the ring, almost crying. Because I remember Sean had me in a hold. Both Sean and me were talking to him.
All right.
It's like, look, okay, like we're panicked, but it's a taped match. We've got a million high spots in our heads. I said, it's a taped match. I said, that's no big deal. They fix the rope. We can go right into all the spots. They just cut.
Right.
You know, so he gets the chin lock, and while we have to wait till I said, just fix the rope. And he goes, I can't. And he would not fix the rope. He would not, I said, I begged him. I said, listen to me. It's taped. You can stop everything right now and fix them. And he wouldn't do it. And the whole match was a disaster. We had no top rope for the whole match. I flubbed up all my spots. I got so, we all did. It just turned into a comedy of errors.
Right.
And I remember I was devastated when it was over. I said, I hope it never airs. It was so bad. We were all crushed by it, how bad it was. Because we all knew how good we could do.
Right.
We were all had a lot of regard for each other in those days. Rockers were an awesome team. Marty was great. We had that little Saturday night match somewhere. That came, I think, much later. But anyway, so a few weeks later, I kept pleading with him to figure out a way to let us have another match, do it again, or film it in a house show or something. I was just so embarrassed by it. Not so much for my sake, but for everybody's sake, but especially my sake. And then I remember Jim showed up in Milwaukee or something like that with the good news that they weren't splitting us up. We're going to keep the tag belts. And I remember being pretty miffed about it because I thought, well, wait a minute. What happens to my big push?
Right.
I've been, wait a minute. It's great news for you, Jim. And I remember I went to Vince and he goes, don't worry, it'll happen. It'll happen. It's just, it'll be delayed a little bit. That's all. I said, well, I'll hold you to that. And the one thing about my relationship with Vince, because you asked me about it earlier, my relationship with him in the beginning was I was very intimidated by him. I didn't say a whole lot to him. But once he kept coming up and thanking me for like an awesome match, what a match, this kind of stuff, I finally, in the beginning days, I said, I'd like to move up to the next level all the time. Like, what does it take to get into the better matches and get a figure or to get he goes, well, you got to work on your mic skills.
So that was one of my questions.
And I'd say, okay, well, and then I would come in all the time, every couple of weeks. I said, well, my interviews are better. And he would come up and sometimes he'd say, your interviews were better this week or whatever. But I always made a point of sort of going in his door, in his office and getting a report card. I remember we described it as that's what it is. It's a report card. Give me my report card. And it's like, if I got A's, B's, steadily kept climbing, but I built up a rapport of, and often in matches, I remember the Saturday night main event, me and Randy had worked out a really good match. A really good match. I wish we could have done that one sometimes. And the one we had was good. But Vince came and goes, no, this is how it's got to be. You got to hurt Randy's foot. He's got to have a bad ankle. This is this. And it was like, well, we're up in like 15 minutes. How do we change? He goes, I don't know. And he looked at me and goes, you're the great worker. You fix it. And I took that as a big compliment at that time. And it was a good match. And I never worked the leg for a long time. That was one of the first times I ever worked the leg, making it up as I went along.
Right.
So where was I?
Well, we're leading to your big. Well, actually, you and Jim did eventually break up. And
So we kept the belts for a little while, and almost like I wanted to get them off. I wanted to get this big push we were talking about before it fades. You know? Right. And I was getting a lot. I was over pretty strong. The glasses and that look with the jackets and all that stuff with Neidhart. And me and Jim had been together 6 years at that point. You know, we'd kind of done our thing. I never thought that we would never team up again. I never saw what. I couldn't foresee at that time what was really down the road for me. But I did want to try singles and see what I could do and see, I saw everybody else making money, like Henning and different guys. I thought, I can do this. I can do this. Have that same spot. So we had to drop the belts to the Nasty Boys, which was fine. I was, happy about it. They were a little stiff, Brian and Jerry. But the match we had at WrestleMania was one of the best matches, one of the best tag matches we ever had on film. Like, what a great match! And the timing and Jimmy Hart, and the way it was done was very credible. Poor what's that? Macaulay Culkin.
Macaulay Culkin. Yeah.
He's in the audience, and I could tell. I know that he was upset when we lost the match, which is so funny, because he was just a little kid then. But, and I remember the very next night, because I was smart enough to know what was going on. Bolog had just come back in. I had nothing to do with him, but I knew the business by that time, and immediately they came up and said, "We're going to stick you with Henning."
Right, it was 91 around this time.
And I said, so what are we going to? Like, you've been promising me the big push, so what are we doing? Like, he just got the belt. So what's the finish going to be? They go, we'll figure. I said, no. I said, wait a minute. I said, I'm not. You guys have asked me to be patient, and I've waited. Now you're going to put me with Kurt, and I'm not going to win. I said, I don't even want to do it. And I stood my ground, and I really was pretty firm about it in a nice way. They said, I don't want to do it. And finally they said, okay. And I remember Vince was like, matter of fact, like, all right, throw Bulldog in. So Bulldog worked with Kurt instead, almost all summer long. And just like I thought, after that one kind of wore itself out and Kurt had the belt long enough, I think he started to get hurt.
Right, his back.
But before he got hurt, I was winning the belt from him. And then he hurt his back. And it was almost the same kind of thing. I didn't know for sure if he'd make it. And then same thing, he showed a lot of respect and that old intestinal fortitude kind of thing. But he did. He showed up and was in a lot of pain. Kurt was in a lot of pain. And he showed up and put me over just out of respect for me, which I've always been really grateful for. The match itself wasn't as good a match as some of the ones we had in house shows.
You're speaking of SummerSlam.
Yeah. But it was a great match, especially when you look at how Kurt had been off for such a long time and what a great job he really did and how hard he really worked. It stands out as one of my favorite matches of all time, especially in light of the fact that Kurt was hurt as bad as he was.